everybody. How are you? Tired? Sleepy?
No.
No? I'd like to thank Dahlia and Ruslan for having me here today. You know, a year ago I was still here, and for the last 9 months I've been working on Royco protocol, which we're calling the liquidity coordination protocol. And I kind of want to start off with giving a primer on, how liquidity works in DeFi, why it's so important, and why it's a requisite for activity. All the basic categories of DeFi protocols. You have lending, borrowing, you have AMMs, DEXs, and then some sort of staking, liquid staking, restaking. This even includes stable coins, in my opinion, because you're basically staking some liquidity, and the protocol, someone does something with it, and you get paid back some sort of yield, right? So lending and borrowing, lenders provide liquidity for borrowers to borrow, right? And that's the activity right there. Borrowers pay interest to lenders, so that's the inherent incentive for the lenders providing that liquidity. For AMMs, LPs provide liquidity for traders to trade. The traders pay fees to the LPs, and that's the incentive there, right? And then for staking, stakers provide liquidity, and the protocol pays back a share of the yield that they earned for putting that liquidity to work, right? So liquidity is everything in DeFi, like without liquidity, and in TradFi. Without liquidity, there's no activity, So I like to think of DeFi as kind of this set of marketplaces, right? Where you have liquidity providers and then all these different opportunities to deploy their capital and liquidity. And liquidity is the only common factor in all of these marketplaces. So you have liquidity on one side, and then you have a certain DeFi action on the other side, right? Whether that's lending, whether that's swapping, whether that's LPing, or staking, anything, right? And liquidity, the way that these two-sided marketplaces end up, panning out is that it's extremely competitive. The winners who create strong network effects end up winning all of the liquidity, right? And then anyone who's new to the space really has to bootstrap this liquidity and solve this issue of the cold start problem where they don't have liquidity, so they can't get activity, right? And no activity means no revenue, and your protocol just ends up dying. So each protocol initially needs to bootstrap this liquidity in order to have activity. And how do you attract liquidity? Through incentives, right? And we've seen this through liquidity mining programs that have gone on for years now. Very famous curve wars back in 2021. Even recently, Uniswap guys, you guys have your incentive program running right now on Unichain and UniV4. You have to pay these incentives to bootstrap this liquidity to any new protocol, right? And this liquidity provider at the end of the day is doing his or her marginal analysis for each of these opportunities and making sure that, okay, they're getting the best yield and best opportunity for providing liquidity. So this is what protocols expect to happen, right? Where it's like, okay, liquidity goes up, volume goes up, protocol fees go up, and then the token value goes up. And you can emit these tokens as inflationary token rewards to attract liquidity, right? But they end up drying up. Like if you're just emitting tokens to people, right, you're gonna attract a lot of mercenary farmers that come in, provide liquidity, take your tokens, dump them on the open market, and leave, right? That liquidity does not stick. It's not sticky. You want sticky liquidity for sticky activity. So what we saw in the very beginning of Royco is the fact that there were a lot of backroom deals happening where it's like a lot of like large LPs and whales and liquid funds were getting these like preferential deals where they were getting like, on paper, 30% APR while retail was getting like 10%, right? And that's not good. In fact, the essence of crypto is this entire like transparent ledger where everything should be happening on chain. to ensure fairness and efficiency. So that's where Royco comes in. We are a protocol that allows you to create liquidity markets on any sort of DeFi action. And I'll talk about the entire evolution, but version 1 allowed you to basically negotiate for liquidity as a protocol, right, for incentives. So you're going to be paying out incentives, and you'll be getting back some amount of liquidity that you desired to procure. And theoretically, this order book should allow you to reach an efficient market clearing price for the liquidity that you're trying to procure, and that is enabled through negotiation completely on-chain, right? So in terms of what Royco version 1 looks like today, is that we have these two different products that kind of come together and in conjunction make Royco v1. So we have vault markets, which are basically a wrapper on top of any ERC 4626 compliant vault, right? 4626 is a very common standard used in the Ethereum ecosystem for representing share-based vaults, right? So you can wrap any ERC 4626 compliant vault with our wrapper, and it allows you to stream incentives in a Master Chef style fashion. Again, Uniswap folks, you guys are Master Chef. But yeah, and then we had an order book on top of this, which basically allowed you to negotiate on the rate at which incentives were being streamed, right? So this rate could be like, okay, you're getting 10 tokens per second. Well, I'll deploy my capital if I'm getting 15, right? And that's how that worked. And the second type of market, liquidity market on Royco version 1, is what we're calling recipe markets, right? And recipe markets are an order book for discrete amounts of liquidity. So it's not based on rate, it's based on a discrete amount of liquidity, and also a discrete amount of incentives on the other side. But that liquidity is going to be deployed using an action which is defined using a where-roll script. So let me explain where-roll. Where-roll is a virtual machine that lives on top of the EVM, and it's super cool because you can actually use outputs from certain function calls as inputs into others. So you can express like a whole sequence of like, okay, go stake here, unwrap here, lend here, borrow from here, and you can use outputs from certain function calls into inputs for subsequent ones. So so where-roll powers these recipe markets where protocols can basically say that, okay, I want you to do exactly this, and I'll pay you this much, and there's negotiation on the price of that action. So yeah, that's Royco version 1. And this works extremely well for protocols like lending protocols, AMMs, staking protocols, whatever, right? But at the end of the day, all of these are living on blockchains, right? And when you launch a chain, they run into the exact same issue, right? Chains don't have liquidity on day one, which means that they don't have activity, right? How do you bootstrap that liquidity? They run into the exact same cold start problem. We identified that, so we developed the CCDM, or cross-chain deposit module. If anyone here knows about Berachain at all, they launched recently. We powered their pre-deposit campaign called Royco, and it used the CCDM, which basically has two components: the deposit locker, which aggregates deposits on a source chain through Royco markets. And what's super cool about this actually is that when you're seeding liquidity on an AMM, a DEX, on the destination chain, right, like the ratios of the two tokens that you're bridging over and seeding the DEX with have to match the market price, right, at that time. And these pre-deposits can be sitting in the deposit locker for weeks at a time, right? So we were like, okay, how do we solve this? And turns out we were like, okay, UniV2 LP tokens are rebasing, right, at all times. Like their redemption ratio is rebasing at all times. So you can hold a UniV2 LP token in this deposit locker for as long as you want, and then price fluctuation that's going to happen is only going to be the amount of time that it takes to bridge over the constituent tokens, and then also deploy that into the AMM on the destination chain. So that's like 5 minutes, right, or less, and that's less than a chain link price feed update. So it's like, that's pretty awesome. So that's the deposit locker, and that lives on the source chain. And then you have the deposit executor, which basically receives these deposits and executes a where-all script to deploy that liquidity wherever it was agreed to be deployed into on the source chain. And I would have made a diagram, but like it would have been super tough to make a graphic like this in Figma, so I was just like, no, I'm not gonna do it. There a marker I can use? No, it's a Sharpie. I'll get kicked out.
Immutable.
Same thing. Permanent.
I got it.
Thank you. Yeah. So, to illustrate how the CCDM works, you basically have these Royco markets, right, on one side, and this could be like LP on Uniswap, on the destination chain. This could be supply into Compound, whatever, right? And you know, LPs come in here and they're like, okay, I'm committing to do this on the destination chain. You know, this chain hasn't launched yet, and I'm committing to LPing on Uniswap on day one on this source chain, or supplying on Compound on this on the source chain, and get bridged over, and have this action done for me on the destination chain. And so you're getting all this like price discovery and negotiation at this layer, and then after that point, you know, the funds get bridged over, and that chain on day one has the liquidity to have activity, like meaningful activity, right? So we did this for Barra chain, and ended up moving over $3 billion over the course of 1 week. And this is a graphic. It's a graph showing all the green inflows are ETH mainnet deposits, and that one contract in the center, or these are addresses, the bubbles, and then that one address contract in the middle is the deposit locker, and you know, all the red is the outflows to Barra chain. You see Uniswap on the top left right there. Those are all the UniV2LP tokens. They got redeemed right before getting bridged over and seeded on Barra chain, or used to seed AMMs on Barra chain. But yeah, so that was our solution for chains, bootstrapping or trying to bootstrap liquidity. And then we also really started to realize that retail LPs don't really like to negotiate because they don't really have pricing power, right? Like if you're working with a few $1,000s, you don't really have any power. Like you can't go to a protocol and say, I want a preferential rate because I'm bringing you $10,000, right? Like there's a reason why these backroom deals would occur in the first place, because these protocols like to have guarantees about size, right? Like they want $50 million for the next 6 months. So the way that we can solve that is by aggregating these retail deposits, right? Like everyone here can work as one single entity or a Royco vault, and now we have collective bargaining, right? Like we can go to any protocol and negotiate for a higher return, and everyone's getting that benefit instead of a single party, right? And they also want like a set and forget type of strategy. Like you give your money to a wealth manager, right? Like you don't want to be there trading all day and actively rebalancing your portfolio. You want to trust someone, a curator, a risk curator, to allocate your portfolio for you and maximize returns, right? So Royco Vaults are our next product. The first one is going to be live this week. This upcoming week for Plume Mainnet. Plume Mainnet is launching, and we're running their incentive campaign. extremely excited. And there's a very, very special curator that's going to be running these vaults, TBA, but it's going to be awesome. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I described this. Vaults are going to be allocating into the highest risk-adjusted markets on Royco. Okay. I'm actually going to skip this part and talk about kind of we talked about like kind of the incentive distribution mechanism that Royco has built so far, right, with these markets and all this. But like we believe that the true value in all of this isn't in any of the incentives. Like these protocols should not have to offer any inflationary token incentives, right? Like everything has a price. Every activity has a price, and you have to let the market price that and commit to it, right? So what is truly valuable here is if you had some sort of order book on chain, right, where you could express an intent, right? Like you could, and let me kind of draw this out in the context of Royco. So you have all these markets, right, which are basically markets to provide liquidity in whichever protocol. And then you have our vaults up here. And what would be really awesome is if the vault or any LP, you know, like me, is sitting here, and we're in a market, and then we set our intent, right? Where it's like, okay, right now let's just say this is supply USD into Aave, right? And this market right here is actually LP, you know, single-sided into Uniswap, USDC, right? So these vaults, and bear with me here, they issue, they're 4626 themselves, right? So they issue some sort of receipt token. So you deposit in USDC and you get back, let's say, VUSDC, right? This is essentially a stable coin, right? Like this should be redeemable. I know that might be contentious, but it's essentially a stablecoin. It's backed by USDC, right? And it trades on-chain like a stablecoin. It would be very cool, right, to have this listed as a collateral type on a lending protocol, right? But Aave, to list you, they want guarantees about liquidators being able to come in and sell whatever bad debt the liquidator is liquidating, right? So let's say they list you and a liquidator comes in and liquidates some bad debt on Aave, right? And now he's sitting on a bunch of this VUSDC, right? This was the collateral used. That's what he got back for paying off that bad debt. And now this guy, like liquidators don't want to sit on inventory, right? Like they don't want to take that risk. So they want to liquidate immediately. If this vault could place a limit offer saying that, look, if the price of VUSDC on Uniswap, right, falls below 97 cents or 98 cents, then automatically reallocate me from this position or whichever other positions I'm in into this single-sided LP so I can bite that sell from the liquidator and preserve the peg of my stablecoin, right? That's very valuable in the sense that you can have like this just-in-time liquidity movement. And you're solving liquidity fragmentation by doing this too. Because it's like, okay, money can be sitting in different pools anywhere in DeFi. It could be fragmented in terms of like the chain state, right? But there are intents and certain guarantees that, okay, if this condition is met, I can pull this liquidity immediately from here to there, right? And me as an LP, I can express that programmatically in this order book. So that's the direction that we're headed in right now. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
So the obvious question is, when are you going to let AI decide for you?
All of this. Well, the beauty is that each of these LPs, like this vault, might be using an AI to decide their own portfolio allocation strategy, right? This guy might be, you might be, right? Like anyone could be, but the AI would be placing intents on this order book, which would be completed or executed if the condition was fulfilled.
Yeah, thank you. I think that would work.
How do you think about vaults acting maybe accidentally in coordinated ways that are really procyclical, like exacerbating price crashes, like all the kinds of things we see in TradFi markets, and like everyone's running the same algorithm and selling all the time? Like, how do you see this creating new problems in that sense in DeFi markets?
Well, are you talking specifically about this example?
Yeah. Or with lots of vaults all doing the same.
Okay, like copy trading each other?
Or just because they all think it's the right, like in a run, it's rational to run, so like maybe they all think it's the right idea.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of the market determining what's going to happen. So I have no thoughts on that, I would say. I think that's just, if they choose to copy and have to bear the consequences, then that's it, yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm curious how this helps attract liquidity beyond what the existing systems offer. It seems to me like liquidity providers are highly sophisticated and capable of evaluating, risk and return.
Yep.
How does that factor in?
Yeah, so to that point, I can tell you from experience that they're not. And that's why these vaults are so valuable, right? That's why they have so much money locked up in them, right? Because people want to set and forget. And we learned that the hard way. Like our version 1 of the protocol was designed, we were like, okay, we have this order book and we can finally, like, liquidity mining is going to become efficient now, right? But that was not the case. In fact, the order book was barely used, and it was like surprising to all of us. So that's why we're going ahead and building these vaults. And we think that, like, okay, you have to have size in any sort of financial market to be able to get favorable terms, or more favorable than what retail is getting. So that's the step forward. And I think the order book is going to be extremely valuable, not for me and you per se, but I think for vaults and for funds, right? For people with a lot of money. Thank you.
One more in this session? Okay. I was gonna say that. I just want to say he graduated less than a year ago.